I think the world is a place of opportunity, and I think the risk, and I think I was trying to say this earlier, but the risk is actually fairly negligible. Like, if you really give something a good go and it doesn't work, who cares? Like, you've given it a really good go. You've probably learned so much from that. And so I think it's important to be ambitious. Not in the sense that I think I'm going to be really successful, but in the sense that I'm going to give everything a really good go. And so, by leading by example, that's the best way to do it, is to say, you want to go out on your bike? Yeah, let's go out on your bike today and let's go for a long cycle or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it, actually, because I sometimes worry with this a bit, and it probably plays into some of the guilt around how much I'm working and how much time I'm being present as a parent. But I think sometimes I can tell myself a story of like, well, it's really good, you're modelling to her like what hard work looks like, and I'm hyper ambitious now. I actually wasn't before, but I worry about Amelie being exposed to a lot of ambition and push and drive that will create a very pressured environment with her. I work with a lot of athletes now who put themselves under a lot of pressure, and that translates into performance-related anxiety or like much more high levels of self-criticism than I would have, because sort of against that confidence piece.
And what's really interesting is at the bigger moments, it doesn't tend to rear its head. I think about it a lot. I think about, am I going to lose my breath when I get up there on stage? But it never happens. And I wonder if that's sort of my system kicking in, like the adrenaline is such that actually it keeps me above board. Dragon's Den, being one of those high pressure moments where, and the process was so strange in the sense that it happened so quickly. We applied, and then within a week, I think we were through to the next round, and then literally within a month or 2 months, we were on TV or being recorded. I stood in front of Stephen Bartlett and Deborah Meaden and Peter Jones and those guys, and pitching Unheard, and it was incredibly nerve-wracking. But I think once I got up there, I did feel comfortable in a strange way.
This is The Modern Load. Every week, I sit down with someone to explore how they were raised, how they're raising now, and what modern parenting really feels like behind closed doors. Because the mental, emotional, and practical load we carry today is different, and naming that is the first step to sharing it. This week, I'm joined by Alex Brees. Alex started his career as an analyst, following a physiology degree. Alex honed his craft at the Times top 10 startup CarWow, where he was responsible for turning consumer data into sales and marketing insights to power their functions. Passionate about music, Alex launched a series of club nights supporting electronic, house, techno, hip-hop, grime, garage and rap artists with their live opportunities. Combining his skill set with his passion, he joined Universal Music as a global analyst, where he worked with the likes of Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Bastille and many more global artists. It was here that Alex developed an interest in leveraging data to reduce uncertainty for artists making marketing decisions. Alex then launched Unheard Music to democratise access to major label marketing power. Since launching, they've worked with over 200,000 artists and labels, including the likes of Tiny Temper, Imogen Heap, Fatboy Slim, Hot 682, Muse, and many more. How's it going, mate?
It's going well. Yeah, busy, trying to balance everything, which I guess we'll cover today.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's going well.
Is balance the goal?
I think I've spent a long time out of balance. I know a lot of founders and people in the business world talk about the importance of balance, but I don't think there is such thing, to be honest with you, especially when you're growing a business. I think you've got to commit 100%. And so it's really then hard to pull yourself away from that and move out of the business when you should do. So, right now I'm trying to find a better balance, because ultimately this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So I'm trying to live by that such that, for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I can keep going at the intensity and pace that's required, really.
Yeah, I think about balance a lot as well, and I feel like it's a real buzzword and everyone talks about it all the time, and I don't really buy into it either. I think the tension of trying to be balanced is actually worse. So I'm sort of trying to embrace, and I've spoken to you about this, of just going to bed with the to-do list not done, and being at peace, I guess, with not having done everything I want to.
Yeah, and also, it's funny, a lot of people say to me, not a lot of people that know me would say I work a lot, and I do work a lot, and you're probably the same, but it doesn't feel like work. So that's the other challenging thing, I think, when you're trying to explain to people that you feel like maybe you do have more balance than you actually do in reality, is because it's fun. Or not all of the time. There's a lot of admin that isn't fun, but, you know, a lot of the time it's fun, and I feel very lucky to do this. So actually it may look like I don't have the balance, but internally I feel like I do, because I'm getting some joy from it and the work.
I'm totally the same. Like, give me unbalanced founder and parent life any day versus like single 9-to-5 corporate bullshit.
Yeah, and you just lose time for other stuff, which becomes less important as you grow, kind of grow and become a parent, you know. And it's now sort of family, work, and health, and that's all I've got time for, and that's all really I want to do, to be honest.
Yeah, it makes you ruthless, I think, with like cutting out stuff you don't need.
Yeah, we talked about it before, but I've made my default this year no, because I think for my natural resting state is probably a people pleaser. You know, I enjoy being around people. I enjoy trying to make them happy in some way, shape or form. I guess that's why I'm building what I'm building, is to try and support people, and they just happen to be artists. But this year I've made my default no, and it's amazing how much additional time it's carved out for me to do stuff which is, you know, contributing to those 3 important things.
Yeah, welcome to the People Pleasers Club. Not a club I'm sure you want to be part of, but I feel the same. And I'm trying to be really disciplined, and I am doing it, but I find it really hard. Like, it doesn't sit well with me when I'm saying no to people who I want to say yes to. But ultimately, family, health, business, etc. has to come first.
And I'm always so jealous of, sometimes I see people and the way they respond, and they're like a blue type, you know, with the blue, yellow, green. They're like a blue or they're a red, and it's just like, no, I don't do that, bye. And I'm like, I'm kind of jealous of that. Like, I wish I could just do a short, punchy sentence. It's so hard. And actually, I voice noted one of our investors before, and he messaged me back saying, I don't do voice notes. Text it to me. And I was like, I was kind of hurt by that, but I was also, that's fucking brilliant. I don't know if I can swear, but that's brilliant. He's right. You know, like, don't waste his time. Send him a punchy. So, maybe that's something for me, you know, people pleasers or whatever to work on is, you can be a people pleaser in some areas, but maybe not in others. Yeah,
and a bit of a plug for Whisper Flow as well. I'm a big fan of that. Have you used it yet?
No, I don't know that.
Oh my God, yeah. You basically voice note it and it writes it into emails and stuff. So you could have your way, he could have his way.
Whisper Flow, okay,
Game changer.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I've had a bit of a day, mate, I'll tell you.
Tell me.
So, first of all, Amelie decided to wake up at 4:30 this morning and then went back to sleep. I did not. So it's been a bit of an early start. Then coming in to London today, the neon sign behind us there nearly didn't make it. So left that on the train. Had to figure out then, so I went to ask somebody like where to go back to for the train, because you don't notice what platform you get off at, you notice which one you get onto. So I had to go and like scramble around to get that, like ran through the train, got off as they're blowing the whistle for the train to go back to Hazelmere, so nearly ended up in Hazelmere. Scrambled into Pret, got onto a call that actually I'd never sent the diary for the call in the first place, so it was an empty meeting, so I just like rammed through my lunch for no reason. I accidentally stole a gingerbread man from Amelie from Pret a Manger, so I'm admitting to my like criminal activity on this podcast. Oh, no. So I'm gonna have to go and pay for that on my way home in Waterloo, because I feel so bad about it.
That's good.
But yeah, so just like perfect kickoff into like the mental load and my brain being so full. I just felt like a complete space cadet today, rolling through life.
Bless you. Do you ever, when you get up at 4:30, do you ever consider just staying up and like working or something?
That's what I did.
It's what you did, yeah. Because I sometimes feel like that, and then I have done that a couple of times, and then I feel really tired later on. But I think that's quite good, because I never get back to sleep either. I was up at 5:20 this morning, similar sort of thing, not with the neon sign and things like that, but
no stealing for you today?
No stealing today, but the karma piece is, you know, interesting. I always think what you put out, you get back. So I think it's important that you go and pay, and you'll get that back.
Yeah, I will. Even if I did pay for an overpriced salad in the first place. So like, let's kick off then a little bit into like life, where you came from, where you are now, how you're choosing to raise your kids and manage business and stuff. But so tell me a little bit about you growing up and what that looked like. Yeah,
okay, so a bit of a mongrel, I suppose, in the sense that I was born in Oxford, which is a beautiful place to grow up. I then moved up north, so I moved up to Lancashire, which is really where I feel like my roots are sort of set in Lancashire, to be honest with you. Sport was a big part of my life. You know, I think, did you play sport?
Yeah, big sport.
And now you work in, there's a bit of sport you work in?
Yeah, so trained as a sports psychologist, like really building high performing teams and systems, and like, yeah, obsessed with sort of big sport family. My husband used to play professional rugby, trying to get Amelie on some sort of Olympic programme, so that training started for that. Not that I'm an aggressive tiger parent or anything, but yeah, sport, like, it changed everything for me as well. I really resonate with what you've said about it before.
And I think, you know, with sport, it builds the resilience. I think that's really important. It builds the confidence. It shows you that, you know, risk, you know, you can have an appetite for risk, and there isn't really, you don't need to have a fallback necessarily. Actually, interesting point now is I'm having one of those moments we talked about at the start.
Okay.
Which I'm happy to keep this in as like an example. So basically, before the podcast, we talked about there's the odd occasion where it doesn't matter who's in the room or what the audience size is, but I have these like moments of breathlessness and like confusion. And I think, you know, you talked about it quite honestly before, whereby when you're operating at that level whereby you're on the edge, and you're on the edge for an extended period of time, yeah, sometimes it manifests itself in different ways. And I just had one for the last like 60 seconds where I sort of lose my breath, lose my composure a little bit, lose my train of thought, and it's maybe worth highlighting that as something that I think people should be aware of, that like the pressure of building a business can manifest itself sort of somewhat physically sometimes.
100%. Like, I think the notion that like our brains and our bodies are not attached, like, it doesn't exist. I'm interested, like, do you find that happens more for you when you are sort of up to the brim?
I think that I'd say for the first 2 or 3 years of building the business, or 2.5 years of building the business, it didn't happen once. You know, and there were lots of times there where I was under like high pressure, pitching on Dragon's Den, or you know, pitching in intense situations, but it never happened. And I think that was because I had the sort of capacity to deal with it. It was still fresh. You know, it still felt sort of like fun and interesting and fresh and dynamic. And it still feels fun and interesting now, but I've had 2 or 3 years of like intensity and high pressure, and, you know, going at it 100% and committing everything to it. So I would say it's more so that it's started to happen in the last year and a half, which I think is more of like an example of the strain that you're under for those long periods of time. Yeah.
And are you trying to actively use any strategies to help you through it?
No. And I think that's, you know, that's the problem, is that, again, you know, we talked about balance and sort of the different things that you have in your life and how important they are and how much you need to commit to them. I always find myself thinking, oh, I could sit and do some breath work for half an hour, or I could do the emails or go to the gym or, you know, spend time with the family. So I don't, and I should, really.
It's always a trade-off, I think, because when you're a parent and you're running a business, time is so finite and it feels like a currency that you have to like protect and invest so heavily in the things that are really important to you that sometimes you feel like you can't invest it in what's seen as to be like sort of nice to have, like additional cherry on top type things like breath work.
So true. And I did the therapy thing for a while, and that was great. I did enjoy that. I got a lot from it. And then I started to sort of question, like, who am I? I sort of started to feel a bit entitled. I was like, why am I spending this money and time on myself? Like, you know, it feels a bit sort of bougie or precious or something like that. So I did stop. But, you know, you got to invest in yourself, right? That's really important.
Yeah, and I don't want to be lazy and like go down a big gendered route, but I wonder if that is a male thing, because like if I'm going to spend money on anything, like it's me. I'm quite not to make myself out to be too bougie, but like I will have regular massages, treatments, like naps, like the things that I need to perform at a high level. Like I view them as high performance behaviours, to use the sport analogy. Like I know if I need to go out and do whatever and be the best parent to Emily or whatever. Like, there are certain things that I need to do that, and I don't mind spending on them.
That is interesting about, I've had this thought probably over the last 12 months, is wanting to be the best possible parent that I can be. And that does mean that I have to be feeling good. And so I've started to think about it. I've not started to do anything about it necessarily, but started to think about it in terms of making sure I can get to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, making sure that I do have maybe one night a week or 2 nights a week where I'm not working late, these sorts of things, because I want to be, the best possible version of myself. And it's funny, name drop.
Here we go.
But Tiny Temper and I, we speak quite often, and we've had a relationship now for the last sort of 5 years or so. And he always talks to me about investing in himself as and he says that I do invest in myself. So we joke about, I paint my nails and I get my hair cut frequently and things like that, which isn't necessarily looking after the insides, but, is looking after the outsides, I suppose. But it's more about, taking the time to invest on, what I suppose is going to impact your output to the world a little bit.
Yeah, I think psychologically you call that stacking. So it's not that any one thing on its own is unachievable, but actually cumulatively, the pressures and the individual tasks and the thought processes and stuff can, when they're stacked, become overwhelming and then have physiological responses to those.
Yeah, and that's what it feels like. It feels like it's more of an incremental build rather than one triggering moment. It's funny, like I said to you, I've done lots of podcasts and it's never happened before in a podcast. But we were talking about it before, so it's sort of front of mind, perhaps. So it feels like it's somewhat random in a way. There's not one triggering event necessarily. Although maybe, like I said, talking about it is a triggering event, clearly.
Well, thank you for being so open and honest about it.
No, that's okay. I mean, it felt like you created an environment for me to want to share it, whereas usually I would sort of try and breathe through it and just ignore it and push through. But, thank you for allowing me to share it. And hopefully it raises awareness around the challenges that, can manifest themselves when you're, when you are trying to build something.
When you're pushing hard. Go on then, so take me back to childhood. So sport's a big thing, grow up in Oxford, but then you move up north, and I think you've said before, you've got a bit of an affinity with the north and the people up there, and it feels like a safe and homely space for you.
Yeah, the north felt like my home, without a doubt. And maybe that was because of the sports that I was playing up there. I fell in love with football and played a lot of football and made some good progress in it as a sport. I played for England schools and England universities and some football clubs when I was younger, and so and that was all associated with the north. So I have a strong connection with sort of my time there, and also I don't know if this is true or not, but the people. I loved the friendliness of the people, and I was up in Manchester last week, and it feels friendlier. You're out on a walk. I mean, you were just talking about your community in around London, which sounds like really welcoming. But in Manchester, you take your dog for a walk, and people will say hello, and you'll have a little chat with them, and these are complete random strangers. So, yeah, grew up in Oxford for 10 years, the North for another 10 years, really. And then went on to study at Liverpool University, degree in physiology. You talked about sports science, which is interesting, and sports psychology. This was really an interest for me too. I was interested in the sciences, so that's why I went to study physiology. But then sort of drifted into, I guess, a similar world to the world that we're in now. But that was my upbringing. Parents went together, or they were together for 10 years, and then they broke up, and I never saw that as something that impacted me, to be honest with you. Maybe it has, and I just don't know.
So, you mentioned your parents separated, and you weren't all together under one roof. I'm interested in how that changed what roles and responsibilities you saw kind of in the household, and who you might have viewed as primary caregivers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say that I did rebel at the time. And the reason I'm laughing and pausing is because I just said I don't think it impacted me. And now I'm talking about how it impacted me at the time, which I think it did impact me at the time. I was sort of longer term, I don't think it has too much, perhaps strengthened me slightly. But at the time, I gravitated towards, I guess, my father, to be honest, because my mother met someone quite quickly. I wanted to be the man of the house, and I think my stepfather wanted to also perhaps be the man of the house, and so there's a little bit of friction there, and that sort of pushed me away towards like my father, who, again, I felt at the time was isolated. He was on his own. My mum had someone, so that's sort of where I drifted towards, really. So I drifted towards my father, but in an interesting way, I still saw my mother as like the strong figure of the family, you know, the person who would keep me in check. Whereas with my dad, it was more of like a friendship, and I had a bit more freedom there. Again, maybe as a 16-year-old boy, that's probably why I gravitated there too. I had a bit more freedom. So yeah, that was sort of the dynamic that was created. We split our time, so I spent half of my time, just less than half of my time with my mum, just over half the time with my dad. But it didn't really impact anything on the schooling front. You know, I was still focused, still did what I needed to do at school, and then same on the sport. It didn't impact anything with regards to sport either.
And that's quite a formative period as like a young man, and you're thinking about what that looks like and what your future might look like and the family setup you might like to have. I'm interested in what sort of modelling you saw maybe from your father if you were spending more time with him there, but like, was he getting stuck into all of the care and responsibilities around you, or did that fall more to your mum?
That probably fell more to my mum and myself at the time. I suppose, you know, I was quite self-sufficient with making sure everything was ready for school and making sure my homework was done and my football kit was ready. But I would say, you know, setting those boundaries, setting those rules and being sort of the driving force behind what I was doing was probably still coming from my mum. And I take lots from that. You know, I want to be a driving force for my kids too. I want to give them, one thing they did a great job at is giving me opportunity. You know, whether it was playing sport or playing an instrument. I was never really very good at music, but my mum asked me, well, she sort of kind of forced me, I suppose, into playing something. And I played the cello, embarrassingly, because I was quite small as well, so I had to carry this cello around on my back, which I probably got a little bit bullied for. And I couldn't read music. That was a big problem. But my mum didn't know this until she saw me play in the school orchestra and I was hovering over the strings. And then she said, you don't have to play if you don't want to. But I gave it a go. So I'd say that's what I take from my mother is like opportunity, you know, not pushing, but encouraging me to get involved in lots of different things. And then with my dad, I think what I take is sort of being supportive but not overbearing. You know, he definitely gave me the freedom to like express myself at football. You know, there was never any additional pressure there. And he was very supportive, but in his own way. You know, he wasn't supportive in the sense of arm round, I love you lots, you're doing a great job. I just knew. He didn't say much, but I knew. And I knew in the small things that he would do, and he still does now. You know, I was up north last week, and he bought me like this light for the front of my cap because I think I said to him, like, I'm walking around at night and the lights aren't on. And it's like so random and weird and like definitely not something I needed, but it's his way of showing that I'm thinking about you. And that's what I'd like for my kids, is to know I'm there, but I don't want to be overbearing. You know, I think that's important.
Yeah, so when you think back to your childhood then and all of the changes that happened and what you saw and the independence that fostered in you and stuff, how consciously are you bringing or not bringing any of that parenting into your parenting style now?
Yeah, you know, it's I think most of it is subconscious. I try not to overthink things. You know, what I try and take is things that I learned more recently. I was speaking to a father of 3 last night at a dinner, and he was saying to me that what he really tried to do and saw an impact from doing was explaining why. So he'd say, no, you can't do that, and this is why. Even at a young age, you know, at 2, 3 years old, no, this is the reason why you can't do that. Like, let's try and have a little talk about it, even if the kid couldn't communicate. So these like new things that I'm learning, which feel more like relevant and present to me because I am a parent now, I definitely take from that. I think subconsciously, you know, like I said, the things that I try and take forward are giving the freedom, encouraging them to channel their energy into stuff that can be productive, and also setting good values. You know, be kind, be honest, be generous. You know, try not to be sort of taken advantage of, like, you know, stand your ground. So these are sorts of things that you would try and teach, perhaps just by doing, you know, and by showing that you exhibit those values too. And then making sure that you and your partner, I think, are on the same page. You know, I think we talked about this previously, but even if you're not on the same page, you know, showing that you're on the same page, I think shows that solidarity, which I think is important.
Did you guys talk about that before, 3 years ago, before you had kids?
Not before, just before, like a couple of months before, perhaps. We thought that would be important. And we did have good discussions around it, because I think with my partner's family, they are very open, and they will have disagreements. They won't mind me saying, they will have disagreements openly. And for someone who has always been like a people pleaser and doesn't really like confrontation, initially I found that really challenging to be around. I was like, fuck, these guys are going at each other. But actually, you know, it's kind of nice. They know exactly where they stand. No one's hiding anything, which I think in my family at times there's been... there hasn't always been that transparency and openness, not because we don't want to be open with each other, but because we avoid the conflict. So I want to try and avoid like certain things like that.
And we've never spoken about this before actually, but would you describe yourself as ambitious, or how ambitious are you? And I'm interested in how that's translated into the girls now.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Because it feels like if I said, yeah, I'm really ambitious, maybe I sound a bit like a dick. But I think I'm ambitious. Yeah, I do think I'm ambitious. I think the world is a place of opportunity. And I think the risk, and I think I was trying to say this earlier, but the risk is actually fairly negligible. Like if you really give something a good go and it doesn't work, who cares? Like you've given it a really good go. You've probably learned so much from that. And so I think it's important to be ambitious, not in the sense that I think I'm going to be really successful, but in the sense that I'm going to give everything a really good go. And I really want the girls to have that attitude too. And so, you know, by leading by example, that's the best way to do it, is to say, you want to go out on your bike? Yeah, let's go out on your bike today and let's go for a long cycle or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that, not in the sense of wanting to be successful, but in the sense of really wanting to give everything 100%.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it, actually, because I sometimes worry with this a bit, and it probably plays into some of the guilt around how much I'm working and how much time I'm being present as a parent. But I think sometimes I can tell myself a story of like, well, it's really good, you're modelling to her like what hard work looks like, and I'm hyper ambitious now. I actually wasn't before, but I grew up in a household where we were told we could be anything, but also if you want to go and do any job, that's absolutely fine. There was like almost reverse pressure in our household, and actually I've come through that and I'm still super ambitious. So I feel like maybe that was an okay way. Well, I actually don't think there is a right or wrong way. That's just how it was for me. But I worry about Amelie being exposed to a lot of ambition and push and drive that will create a very pressured environment with her. I work with a lot of athletes now who put themselves under a lot of pressure, and that translates into performance-related anxiety or like much more high levels of self-criticism than I would have, because sort of against that confidence piece. So I worry about it. But actually hearing you say that maybe ambition is just giving it your best shot all the time, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I think... And I've never thought too much about ambition. I suppose perhaps like the athletes that you talk about, ambition for them would be winning the gold medal, you know, or scoring a goal in a final or whatever it might be. But I think maybe if you can channel that into something slightly different, like I said, by giving it 100%, that's really all you can do. You know, you can't guarantee a win, but you can guarantee that you give it everything to try and win. And I think perhaps that provides a lot of solace thinking about it like that too.
Yeah. So practically, give me a bit of a flavour for what things look like in your household at the moment. Like, how are you managing 2 young kids, like career, everything, you and your partner? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, as you saw with the slight breakdown earlier, I'm not managing very well. But I am, it's early mornings. You know, we start our day at 5, 5:30. One of the kids is up. We've got a 4-month-old and an 18-month-old. So that's intense. But we try our best to split, you know, the modern load, as you talk about. We try our best to split that equally, whilst also trying to understand what is best for the unit, the family unit. You know, and we had this great discussion a couple of weeks ago, Sasha and I, where it was like, okay, we've now got to understand who's going to have to make the sacrifices where to ensure that the family is in the best position possible. For example, if Unheard has an opportunity to sell for 50 million quid in a few years' time, and we both believe that, that means that Sasha is going to have to sacrifice something to allow me to commit. And on the flip side, is if we think that actually Sasha's going to come up with something and she's working on some things now which are really cool, that's going to be a driving force to provide our family with the best possible situation. I've got to sacrifice what I'm doing to do that. And so that was a great discussion. And that sort of feeds back to the day-to-day as well, whereby we're trying to work around each other's schedules, making sure that if I need to be in early, I have the opportunity to be in early. If she needs to be in early, same goes for her. But the thing that I love doing at least once a day is either breakfast with the kids or bed and bath. Like I try and do one of those each day, so we both get a little bit of FaceTime. Because that's just like a really beautiful and joyous time that I don't want to sacrifice. There are definitely times where you have to, because you've got a pitch meeting or whatever it might be that you have to go to. But we try and do that as a non-negotiable each day. One of us does bed and bath, the other one does breakfast.
Yeah, I love those moments as well. I actually have taken up golf and tennis because I recognise I didn't have any hobbies outside of Emily. She's like literally my hobby. She's what I want to do at the end of the day, like as a bit of a fun release, but it's probably not the most healthy thing. So I'm going down the sport route instead.
Golf's an interesting one.
A lot of business done on the golf course.
Yeah, exactly. And it's long stints. You're out all day or half a day, I don't know. But
yeah. I
that's
just
great.
go to the driving range, so it's fine.
Oh, nice.
And do a little par 3. We'll go golf date for us next time.
I'm up for it.
But yeah, Mark and I do the sort of push and pull. Actually, I'm going to scrap that. I won't name Mark. People do his name, but I won't name him. We do exactly the same, like the push and pull thing of like actually we can't both be kind of on all the time. And I think that is the nature of a true partnership. Like I want to support him to achieve his goals, and there will be a time for him. Like at the moment, I'm being lucky that he's probably carrying a little more for our family so that I can pursue my goals, but not for me necessarily. Like it is relatively detached from my ego, and actually it's about setting us up for a better future, whatever that looks like. And really the sort of core values driving that for me are around like agency and autonomy and like being able to have more flexibility as a family to make the decisions we want that are best for us.
And it is really hard. I think the transition is really hard because, you know, an example is on one day a week at least I leave the office at 4 p.m. and that is horrendous, or at first was horrendous to do because I'm so used, and it sounds silly maybe to even saying that, but I'm so used to being first in, last out. It gives me that sort of confidence that like I'm doing enough, and people can see that. You know, I'm sort of a leader by doing rather than sort of saying and telling. And I was losing that one day a week is how I felt, to the point where it really weighed on me, and I had to share it in a company meeting that it was weighing on me and that I'm going to leave at 4 o'clock. So you might see me leaving, but it doesn't impact my commitment to Unheard. Like, you know, I was really sort of trying to justify it and get off my plate. So I think the transition is really hard. But as long as you're open and communicating that to your partner and your partner understands that is hard, then I think, you know, you get each other through those moments, those transition moments. Yeah,
it's that communication piece. And I think like also what you said there, you had a massive opportunity to model like good parenting to people in your team, and I think now work and lives aren't separated in a way that they were for our parents, and I think the ability to name that, especially for fathers, like is a really important piece. There's lots of movements now around like parenting out loud and the dad shift and stuff doing really good work in this space, but it's okay for you to leave at 4. There's a lot of Sunday nights you're working late.
That is true, and it's like we had a HR consultant in who I know very well. Like she's a friend as well. And she always used to say that to me, is like I would communicate something on Slack to the team, and she would always say like, why are you even bothering with that? Like, why are you telling people that you're doing that or you've done that or whatever? And I think it's that part in you as a founder where you want to ensure that people know that you're kind of committing to this, and maybe there's some insecurity there as well, but you are 100% committed whether you leave at 4 or you leave at 10 at night. It doesn't matter.
Have you had to navigate your partner going back to work since you've had the little ones?
We did for 4 months.
How was that?
And then she was off again. Honestly, that felt slightly easier because there was solidarity in each day, as in she knew she had to be in 10 till 4 today, and I knew I had to be in like 8 till 6 or whatever if I was doing or whatever. So because we had that kind of sort of consistency that we're both in the office, that was easier. Whereas now it feels slightly harder, only because our second, she's got a bit of reflux and she's a bit unpredictable, and so it feels like there's more pressure on me to sort of be more present and be supporting, especially when Sasha's at home on her own all day. Like, I think that can be really hard when your partner's at home on their own, dealing with a baby who's unpredictable. I feel slightly more pressure to make sure I'm making sacrifices to be at home, or not sacrifices, but making a commitment to be at home more. So when she was at work, it felt a little bit easier. We both had a groove, like we knew the routine, whereas now it feels a little bit more, there's some flex in there, which I find more challenging, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because what we hear from our community is actually that can be one of the really big pain points when you're navigating the transition of like the primary caregiver or the person who's given birth going back to work, because then you've got almost this like invisible, unspoken workload that doesn't really get navigated, often defaults to the person who's been doing it for the longest, and that can create quite a lot of tension.
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys nailed that.
Yeah, that felt okay. And actually, I'm looking forward to her going back to work as well, because again, I will know her routine and that will be fairly fixed. Obviously, if the kid falls over at nursery or whatever, it changes. And I'll have my sort of somewhat fixed routine. Like, I really need structure and consistency. Like, I'm a little bit OCD like that. If I know what's going on, then I feel better about it. And I think we've lost that a little bit just with baby number 2. But I think we'll gain it a little bit more when Sash goes back to work.
Who does the nursery ring if you need to pick up a sick kid?
Oh, that's a good question. We've both had to recently, because, and this was just for one incident, we both had to, because Sasha had to go in and collect Penelope, our eldest daughter, and I had to go back and look after Iris because she was asleep and she was not in a good routine. And so we've sort of both been making sure it's okay. But yeah, those calls are just a nightmare, to be honest with you.
Where's the dreaded call?
It's like, are you sure that she's bumped her head really hard and needs to go to hospital? Yeah, we're pretty sure it's quite bad. Oh, God, okay.
I sometimes just turn my phone over.
Yeah.
Hope for the best.
Fair enough. I'll go at 5.
Digital detox, yeah, exactly. When you look at how you guys are parenting today versus how you were raised, like, what do you think the differences are that maybe we're facing that our parents didn't?
I do think that both, in our situation anyway, and I think in society as well, is ambition. We talked about ambition. Ambition sits within both parents, whereas I do historically, in my situation, I think is that one of the parents perhaps wanted to be the breadwinner and was sort of pushing, and the other one was quite happy to support at home. Whereas now I don't think that's necessarily the same. I think in my situation, again, just speaking from my own experience, we both want to push. And we both want to be out there and ambitious, which means that, sure, we both want to be at home looking after the kids too, but there's more sort of stress and strain on, okay, if we both want to do this, we're both going to have to try and navigate and find the balance. So that's certainly something that we have experienced. And then the second, I suppose, is the being conscious of, and we're not quite at this age yet, but you've been at this age, but is conscious of the sort of digital media that can be consumed, or like social media, or the online news that the kids can go on and consume. We're definitely conscious of that. Like, even with the iPad stuff now, is like we don't get the iPad out. We sort of get a book or something to colour in anyway. So I think those are two things that we are navigating now that I don't think 20 years ago parents were really sort of navigating or considering, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence now around a lot of the pressures of parenting are, I don't want to say like self-induced because it sounds victim blaming, but we do have a different approach to parenting. We are more like what you were saying earlier about, I want to be the best dad ever. Like, and that's not to say our parents weren't trying to do a good job with us, but I think just the framing around it was different. I think the comparison was different. I think the thinking of, like, what have we exposed them to? Like, how many magical moments have they had? How many learning experiences have they had? All of these different bits adds, when we go back to that stacking point again, like, we know from a mental load point of view, they're actually occupying quite a lot of our brain space, which is finite. So if we are occupying it with that kind of stuff, it's really difficult to free our brains up for whatever we want to use them for, or have some peace and calm.
That is really interesting. We're definitely more conscious now, I think, maybe again because of social media or what's online, but certainly more conscious of like wanting to be the best, and also sort of like show that you're doing a great job as well. There's that element of it. Like I know between my friends is I've got one friend in particular who's got a daughter who's a similar age to our eldest, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but he's so competitive and almost like, oh, yours is walking now, is she? Oh right, okay. And he'll come back in a couple of weeks and be like, oh, ours is walking now, and I don't know if that was a thing. Like it probably was in some cases, but it feels like it's more of a thing now. So yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah. How do you guys manage that? How do you navigate it? What sort of conversations are you having around like the realities of the modern day parenting being a different game essentially, and the tools that you need for it?
Yeah, to be honest, we try and go back to our core values all the time, and we try and just strip it right back to being honest and authentic and making sure that the girls are sort of channeling their energy into the right things. We try not to overthink it, because otherwise I think you can get completely lost in what you consume online. And then my partner does a little bit of scrolling and she sort of brings some ideas to the table, and maybe so often, but we try our best to strip it right back to our core values and what we believe. Like I said, I think the communication piece is really, really important. I think having that open and honest conversation and being able to resolve conflict quite quickly, I think is also really important, because it can be, there can be a lot of tension, it can be stressful.
Yeah. I think that simplicity piece is really important, and I think it's going to be interesting, not just with parenting, I think just in life and the way we're consuming things. Obviously, like the analog trend is coming back in, people are rejecting screens and some of the digital stuff, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But we certainly think it's important to be having the conversation around what the realities are and how much strain it is putting on people, because it is a different game to what others have had to face. We're the first generation having to deal with it.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you feel like don't even want to use the word struggling, but like when you're feeling a way about it, or you're not thriving in the way that you might expect to, or you're putting pressure on yourself, there is a reason for that. It's not a failing, it is just a different game.
And where do you think it comes from? Do you think it comes from... maybe now we see, like with my partner in particular, she sees like successful women. She can see that online, so she wants to successful. I guess being defined as like someone who's built a business or is supporting the family both by being present as a parent, but also having made lots of money. Do you think that's where it comes from, because more women are seeing this now? Or?
I think like the systemic stuff has got a big part to play. I think the super mummy title has got like a lot to say for itself. I think it's quite a toxic... The reality is you cannot be all of the things all of the time, and that's sort of the lie that we've been told, like specifically women, of like, go have a career and make all your kids food and have a wheatgrass smoothie in the morning before you go for your 10k run. And so that was just not realistic. And then people feel like they should be reaching those standards. There's obviously a huge amount of like systemic and policy-based catching up to do in terms of how long dads get in terms of paternity leave, and how that sets the standards for the rest of that time off. Policies about women being able to leave the workplace to have kids and go back in, part-time work, how much stuff default falls to one person within the relationship. I think what we're striving for now is not... This is slightly controversial, but I actually don't think we want to strive for like equal parenting. I think what we need to strive for is like intentional parenting. So come together as a family, as a unit, as a system, and work out what good looks like for you, and then intentionally work towards that. So that like it might be that at one point I'm doing 20 and Mark's doing 80, but then we've both agreed and we've contracted, so that's fine. And then that will change over time. I think trying to strive for balance, 50-50, we do the same, just creates a tension that actually doesn't need to be there. Yeah,
that's really interesting actually, because we talk a lot about balance and we talk a lot about trying to contribute equally, which never ends in a productive conversation, really, to be honest with you, because to your point there, which is why I thought it was interesting, is like it should be flexible. It should be that actually like this week you really need to lean in here, I need to lean in there, but the conversation never is always about balance and trying to create like an equal contribution, both in work and then both at home. So I think the reframing I'll take as something that's really valuable.
Yeah. And I think like we wouldn't have that expectation of ourselves in any other like facet of life. At work, you would have days where you're going turbo and you're hyper productive, and you can do a big 12-hour shift on your laptop because you're just going for it. And then there are some days where you can't.
Yeah.
And it's the same with parenting. And so you have to have the ability to sort of tag team in and out based on like energy levels and having each other's backs for where you are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Agreed.
Which I think comes back to like the values around kindness, generosity, and the words we hear most often is like resentment, anger, frustration, but very divisive, and it becomes again like we think that a lot of the language around this stuff is quite I'm going to say lazy, which again is a tiny bit controversial, but I think it's easy to blame and to divide rather than actually pragmatically look at the whole problem and what roles everyone is playing in that problem. To your earlier point, it's really complex. It's very hard, which is why no one's solved it, right? But again, like the awareness and the intention to do things differently, I think is a very good place to start.
And it's interesting because we've been stuck in a cycle before, you know, talking about me and Sash, whereby she thinks I'm getting a break by going to work, and I think she's getting a break by being at home. You know, and really for a long time we failed to talk about that, but we held resentment towards the situation. And then finally, when we did manage to have like a productive conversation about it, it became so obvious about like where the resentment and tension was coming from. So I think just like having those open discussions is not enough people perhaps are doing it, or creating the space to have that conversation, because creating the space to have that conversation can be really hard too.
I think that's actually the more important thing, and like the ability to like really listen and try to not judge, and not end up having a tired off about who's the most tired, which can be really easy to do. But again, if you think about the workplace, like you would never go into a meeting with a co-founder or an investor or something and just like state your point really strongly and not listen to theirs. But we seem to have a different rule base for the home.
Too comfortable,
maybe. We show our real selves. Cool. So I always like to end with this question because I think work and home are kind of two sides of the same coin. So tell me, what was your first job? How much did you earn an hour? And what did you take from that you've brought into how you live your life today?
That's a great question. Pot wash?
Yeah.
You probably get pot wash a lot, do you? Or like working in a restaurant bar maybe. Pot wash, less than £5 an hour. I don't know if that's legal now, but less than £5 an hour. And what I took from it was being reliable. There's a lot of value in being reliable. I was a reliable pot wash, and then I became a reliable barman and a waiter. You know, so if you're reliable and consistent, you can sort of work your way up, and getting stuck in. You know, and not being afraid to sort of say yes and give things a go. I think I talked about my default answer now is no, but when I started Unheard, my default was yes, and actually there was a lot of value in that, because I said yes to so many opportunities, which ultimately then allowed us to raise capital, build the business, generate more revenue. And one example of that is I didn't want to go to the Middle East to this music conference, but I did. I was like, okay, go, I'm going to do it. I went, and then I sat next to this amazing woman called Hazel Savage. She had started her company and sold it to SoundCloud, and we just got chatting. And then we got back to London. I sent her a message, say, hey, great to meet you. And she was like, oh, I'm near your office, like, let's grab a coffee. We grabbed a coffee, and she was one of our investors, who then ended up introducing me to 3 or 4 other incredible investors and partners, and she's one of our board directors today. So I think that speaks to the power of saying yes for a period of time. It really did create lots of opportunities for us. It's slightly different now because I need to be laser focused on, we're trying to get to profitability, and that's what I want to try and achieve. And I think saying no creates time for that. But I think there's a time where saying yes can create that opportunity, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when I think back to my younger self, that's what I did do it anyway, so it's not necessarily advice I would give, but I would say just graft the hell out of it while you can. Like I often talk about, and I know everyone wishes they were younger, but I wish I was like 25 now and had all of the knowledge that I do and all of the time, and I would absolutely graft on this business in a way that I can't do as a parent. But obviously the having the knowledge and the layers and the like emotional intelligence and all of the experience and stuff that comes with that genuinely I think makes me better than a 25-year-old tech bro trying to build this thing. Obviously, especially considering the context, but I do think that yes mentality for a period of time is helpful, but then I think the transition from yes to no is really hard. And I called it ROMO. I don't know if anyone else calls it, but like regret of missing out. So I'll like sometimes not go to an event. I'm trying to be really disciplined at the moment. We're in build mode, pushing towards launch of not going to everything. And then I'll see photos the next day of it, and there'll be someone there who I've been trying to like connect with for ages, or I really wanted to spend time with or meet or like network with. And I have like that feeling of like, oh, you really fucked up. Like you should have gone, like push yourself. And I find that hard sometimes. The yeser in me finds it really hard that I've said no.
I think that's really interesting, because I do believe that you sort of end up where you're meant to, and so decisions like that where you feel like maybe you regret not being there, I do think it's for a reason. You know, you didn't go for a reason, and that reason felt right at the time, and trusting your instinct and your gut is really important. Like actually, that's one thing I wish I'd done more of at the start, is trusting my gut, but I didn't, because I was young. I was new to raising money. I was new to running a business. And so when you bring in more experience, or you have more experience around you, you go, no, they must be right. Even if it feels wrong, you think they must be right, but they're not. You know, and I learned this, you know, over the period of a few years. And I think that's one thing that I wish I had done more. And definitely is a lesson I'm going to teach, you know, my kids, is like, if it's not right, it's wrong. And you know, trust how you feel about that. And you mentioned as well the hard work thing. I think that's one thing I always say to investors and partners, is like the only thing that I can guarantee to you is I'm going to work really hard at this, and I'm going to commit 100%. And perhaps that's something I picked up from growing up as well from my parents, is, you know, that my mum in particular, she did work really hard, and I could see that. And I think, you know, like you talked about, it's so important, and that's really the only thing you can guarantee. You can't guarantee success necessarily, but you can guarantee that you're going to really work hard and commit to this.
Yeah, so you've spoken about some of those like anxieties and struggles breathing, but I also know that you've done some really big things. So I'm wondering, like, has that shown up for you in some of those like bigger moments?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is at the bigger moments, it doesn't tend to rear its head. I think about it a lot. You know, I think about, am I going to lose my breath when I get up there on stage? But it never happens. And I wonder if that's sort of my system kicking in, like the adrenaline is such that actually it keeps me above board. Dragon's Den, you know, being one of those high pressure moments where, and the process was so strange in the sense that it happened so quickly. You know, we applied, and then within a week, I think we were through to the next round, and then literally within a month or 2 months, we were on TV or being recorded. I stood in front of Stephen Bartlett and Deborah Meaden and Peter Jones and those guys, and pitching Unheard, and it was incredibly nerve-wracking. But I think once I got up there, I did feel comfortable in a strange way, and again, I think that was sort of my system kicking in. And one of the things, you know, that you don't see is I was up there pitching for about 2 hours. So my pitch was maybe 5 minutes, I think just less than 10 minutes. And then the Q&A was almost 2 hours, which was really intense. But again, almost like a diamond, like the pressure sort of, you know, does improve you and creates and gives you the confidence to know that you can do it again and again. And one thing we're all about at Unheard is creating opportunity. And so the thing that really sort of meant a lot to me was we could take an artist on, and an artist performed, and then they were on BBC, and they were this artist who had, you know, a small following and had never had that opportunity. So that was the thing that I really took from that, is we created it was only one, but we created one great opportunity for an artist.
Very cool. Any little secrets you can give us from Dragon's Den behind the scenes? So you've given us the 2 hours thing. Did you get a break in those 2 hours?
No break.
No break.
You got to stand still. Which is hard for me. I'm quite twitchy. And there's no lift.
I have heard this one before.
There's no lift.
Yeah, God, it's all a lie, isn't it?
Yeah, but they were really good. The aftercare was great. You know, we didn't take the money. We were offered money. We said yes on the show, but we couldn't agree terms afterwards, and that's okay. And I think that probably happens a little bit. But it was a great experience. I'm very grateful for everything really over the last 3 or 4 years.
Did you stay in touch? Did you go for a beer with Stephen Bartlett in his LA mansion?
Not Bartlett, no. Yeah, not Bartlett. He didn't like it. So, which is fair enough. He had his own view. But I had a really good experience with Peter Jones's team. Really good experience with Deborah Meaden directly. Like, she was great and responsive, and we actually had a couple of chats. So, I think on the whole, I think it's a great program. Gives people opportunity.
Well, from Dragon's Den to the Modern Load, both big high platforms. Thank you so much, Alex, for talking to us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of business. I know how busy you are, but you brought a really interesting angle and undoubtedly the coolest dad we've had on the pod to date. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Sophie. Thank you so much.
That was Alex, and this is The Modern Load. Real conversations about modern parenting, work, identity, and everything we carry in between. If this conversation resonated, please share and check out our other episodes.